I really don't like this culture that's emerged via Twitter mostly, where you all of a sudden have to be this maximalist that basically falls on their sword and never sells in order to be legitimate. And I think that that's a really dangerous place to be. So, look, if I take a
Why is that dangerous? Yeah.
Well, if I take a much, much bigger step back, let me put Solana in the context of crypto, and let me put crypto in the context of the markets and where we are today at the end of the week after, Q3 earnings in November of 2021. We have the stock market at absolute all-time highs.
Ripping.
We have crypto at absolute all-time highs.
Ripping.
We have the art markets. I don't know if you guys saw Phillips and Christie's and Sotheby's this past week at absolute all-time highs.
Sold another Beeple for $25 million.
We have inflation at a 30-year high. We have 10-year break-evens at a 25-year high. We have, $1 point some odd trillion that we just approved last week, and we're still horse trading on another $1.8 trillion of stimulus that we're going to put in. And so then you have, I think the most important thing, which is the two most important founders of our generation, the two smartest people who have really consistently won, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, have collectively sold more than $11 billion of their holdings this year alone. And if you can't take all of that and decide for yourself what's right for you and your family, you're doing yourself a disservice. I think it's important for me to never sort of be forced to tell folks whether I'm buying or selling, although I'm willing to do it in moments where I think it's important. But I think it's really important to understand the context. And so I think these folks that think derisively about individuals who are managing risk, I think it's really naive. And I think it creates a lot of missed opportunity for them as well. If the smartest people in the world are now selling their core holdings that they told you they would never sell, and you are not reconsidering your position on things, you're either much smarter than them or you're being really, really reckless. But what's so funny is half the people on Twitter spend all their time in crypto land saying things like, never going to make it, have fun staying poor. They're extremely, Jason, as you said, tribal. I'm not sure that they're doing first principles analysis of these things.
They're toxic.
They've gotten exceptionally lucky.
Yeah.
Some of them are exceptionally good, but many people, broadly speaking, have gotten exceptionally lucky. And I think a little bit of it is getting to their head where they become, very virulent against people that they think, whose perspectives may actually be negatively affecting their position without actually understanding what David said, which is these are incredibly deep liquid markets, and one person's opinion can't do much of anything. A lot of the stuff that we've done, DSO, is purely driven by developer interest. When we see developers in the open source ecosystem building things on top of this stuff, making stuff that's composable and usable by other people and building infrastructure, we don't really second guess that because they are spending the most important currency, which is not monetary capital, but human capital.
Yeah, their time, their skill.
Their time and their skill and their reputation.
They can apply to another project, yeah.
And so when enough developers, so I've always thought you just follow the developers, and as more and more projects get started, you just have to unemotionally support that. I think the writing is on the wall, which is Bitcoin is gold, Ethereum looks like it's trending to be silver, and Solana could be the first, but there will be others that come after it, of real developer ecosystems that can be built on top of it. The other thing that I would offer up to people for them to think about is, before you blindly go and rush into crypto, one way in which I try to think about these things is in the following way. You see these projects get started all the time, and I would view each of these projects as a mini economy and really try to think, what is the economic value of what's happening under the hood? So simple example, Helium is an interesting project that's trying to build a completely decentralized, 5G infrastructure, right? Render is a really interesting project that's trying to build a completely decentralized, graphical processing infrastructure, right? GPUs essentially. In both of those things, you can quantifiably, economically measure what the value is that people get, right? In the case of Render, you're basically displacing an AWS instance. And so that has a price and a value. And so, for Render to be valuable, there's an economic value that it replaces. If you're joining a hotspot, that has an economic value where you necessarily have to pay, to get internet connectivity. If you all of a sudden are on the Helium network, that displaces a measurable economic quantum. Understanding that is probably, and taking the absolute value of that, is the best way of really understanding which projects have potential. So if you take those two ideas and marry them together, where is their developer interest and where is their measurable economic activity? At the intersection of those, I think, are the really compelling projects that can win. And the reason I think it's persistent is that there's all of these things are intertwined. And so, if you want to just bear with me for a second, like when this, let's just go to the entry level economic job, right? So you're a barista at Starbucks or you work at McDonald's and you're making $17 to $20 an hour. What that does is it shifts labor. And eventually there are other people that are entering the workforce or, may shift jobs. And essentially it just causes this leaky bucket effect where everybody else has to then accommodate itself. So, you have a guy like, you have a company like Amazon, which is now going to pay $25 or $30 to keep folks, right? Because otherwise they may say, if I make $15 or $16 an hour, I'd rather work at McDonald's. It's simpler.
And free college.
It's not backbreaking work, blah, blah, blah. So then they start to increase the amount that they pay. They increase their benefits and the like. I saw this thing this week. There's a crazy thing that's happening though, which is it's now pulling people from non-traditional job classes into those jobs. There are teachers that are leaving teaching to go work at an Amazon warehouse. There are firefighters that are quitting being a firefighter to go work at an Amazon warehouse because you make the same or more, plus you have all of these other benefits and the job is structurally a lot easier. And so people are making different optimizations. And to that point, I think we talked about this, and Nick, you can put it in the group chat. In Reddit, as an example, there is more engagement in the subreddit around having a simple work life than there is now in Wall Street bets, right? So there's been a structural cultural change where people need to get paid more to do the same amount of work. And then at the same time, you have all of the supply side getting more expensive. Fertilizer makes corn more expensive. Lumber makes house prices more expensive. Chip prices makes the iPhone and cars more expensive or completely backlogged. Yesterday at Poker, Sonny was showing us he bought a Tesla and the delivery period is October of 2022.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's freaking crazy. So I think that this is the beginning of a persistent cycle.
I think
in 1980 we changed the goalposts for CPI. So even as a measurement to know what we look at, and I think Jack Dorsey tweeted this out. So Nick, you may be able to find this tweet, but we changed the measurement of how CPI measures. And so if you go back to the original measurement, it looks like inflation and CPI is much more pernicious than we would otherwise think it if we just look at the new CPI that we started to look at as of 1980. So that's another sort of like point.
We did the same thing with.
I just go back to what I said early on.
Who had given up.
The two smartest people that we both know are net sellers.
Well, they're selling some, yeah. I mean, they're not selling everything.
I'm just saying the two smartest people we know.